A lone wolf special forces operator stands as the last line of defense against a ruthless mercenary group, determined to foil their plan to hijack a high-speed train full of innocent hostages. In the Republic of Georgia, an elite military company known as the Black Swans, led by William Lewis and his children Grace and Oliver, is contracted by SAS Commander George Clements to clear a remote village for a British gas pipeline. Despite initial resistance, the Black Swans resort to violence, leading to the loss of lives in the village. A young local secretly captures the atrocities on her mobile phone. Meanwhile, we meet Tom Buckingham, a highly trained operative of the renowned Special Forces unit in the British Army, the SAS, as he prepares to propose to his girlfriend, Dr. Sophia Hart, during their trip to Paris. Tom is unaware that the events in Georgia will soon draw him into a confrontation with the Black Swans. As the video of the Black Swans spreads across the internet, inciting outrage, British Prime Minister Atwood secretly orders Clements to eliminate the Black Swans instead of bringing them in for trial to cover up his involvement. Lewis orders his children, Grace and Oliver, to flee to the United States while he and a handful of his men stay to stall the SAS. Tom later arrives at a property where a seemingly pregnant woman tends to her garden. The woman turns out to be a black swan, and Tom incapacitates her before she could pull out her concealed gun. The rest of the SAS unit closes in. Major Bissett, the commanding officer, insists on using non-lethal means to take the Black Swans in, much to Clements' frustration. A fierce gunfight ensues. Despite the Black Swans' efforts, the SAS breaches their defenses. When Tom confirms Lewis's presence to Bissett, Clements joins the fray. Clements orders Tom and another operator, Declan, to chase after Grace, leaving Lewis alone with him. In a dramatic turn of events, Clements betrays his long-term partner, Lewis, following the orders of the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Tom and Declan pursue a woman resembling Grace, who charges at them with a grenade. In a split-second decision, Tom is forced to take action to defend himself and Declan, narrowly escaping the explosion that followed. Major Bissett is dismayed about the casualty, but Tom assures him that the woman was not Grace. Tom tells him that the Black Swans knew they were coming and that someone must have warned them, giving Grace time to slip away unnoticed. Amidst the chaos, it becomes evident that Tom and Declan share a friendship forged through their experiences within the SAS. As Tom and Sophie embark on their train journey to Paris, a mysterious woman in a wheelchair boards the same train. The mysterious woman turns out to be Grace in disguise. As she removes her prosthetics in the lavatory, a train officer barges in. Grace swiftly disables him. Tom leaves Sophie momentarily to make his way to the bathroom. Along the corridor, he catches a glimpse of Grace as she leaves the lavatory, prompting Tom to investigate. He notices blood on the lavatory door, which he later breaks into to find the train officer incapacitated. Tom then contacts Declan at the SAS headquarters to inform him that Grace is on their train. Declan takes it up to Major Bissett, who first wants visual confirmation on Grace before he makes a move. Major Bissett is then seen sending a text to an unknown recipient. As the train approaches the Channel Tunnel, Declan advises Tom to let the French pick up Grace, but Tom insists on confirming Grace instead. Grace later gathers her men to execute their plan, hijack the train and hold hostages to blackmail the British government. Grace puts the train to a halt in the middle of the tunnel, prompting the fire response team to be dispatched. Zada, one of the Black Swans, fries the surveillance cameras while another lights up flares to simulate a fire. The fire response team later arrives. It appears Grace's brother, Oliver, managed to infiltrate them, smuggling weapons and tactical gear for the Black Swans into the tunnel. As the Black Swans gather, Tom sneaks up on them, takes out some of their men, and attempts to lock them in. However, the Black Swans retaliate by shattering the door with an explosive, causing a massive shockwave that disorients the passengers. Outnumbered and outgunned, Tom retreats back to the train, determined to protect Sophie. Grace then orders her men to remain vigilant of Tom, whose identity remains unrevealed. As Tom makes his way back to Sophie, Oliver intervenes, seizing control of the train car and holding the passengers hostage. With no other option, Tom escapes through the window to find an alternate route back to Sophie. Tom manages to snap a picture of Grace and forwards it to his friend Declan. Declan takes it up to Major Bissett, finally compelling him to take action and deploy the SAS. Meanwhile, Zeta confiscates the mobile phones of the passengers. Sophie conceals hers and surrenders a misplaced phone she picks up on the ground. As the news about the hijack breaks, Prime Minister Atwood gives Clements the command of the operation to ensure Grace's permanent downfall. Back on the train, Grace shoots a man who fails to surrender his phone, inadvertently injuring a child in the process. Grace then calls for a doctor on the train to treat her wound, which Sophie volunteers for. Meanwhile, the SAS arrives on the scene. The flares strategically set up by the Black Swans discourages the SAS from entering the tunnel. The SAS proceeds to the Central Service Tunnel to find another way in. Now surrounded, the Black Swans drills through the tunnel for an alternate escape route. Inside the tunnel, the SAS set up a control point. Clements scolds Major Bissett, who seems to be stalling, and forces his hand to engage on the Black Swans as he is now in command. As Sophie treats the wounded child in the lavatory, Tom disassembles the toilet from underneath and gives them a way to escape. Sophie refuses to leave. Her sense of duty as a doctor compels her to stay and treat the wounded. She urges Tom to save the girl instead. After the girl is safely out of the train, Sophie convinces Tom to knock her out to avoid suspicions, to which Tom immediately complies. As tension escalates, a confrontation ensues between the SAS and the Black Swans. When the SAS pulls back, Grace reveals to Oliver that she has an informant who warned her, a traitor within the ranks of the SAS. Grace initiates contact with the SAS, presenting them two options. Either the British government admits that they hired the Black Swans for the operation in Georgia, or they comply with a $500 million ransom and provide a helicopter for escape. Major Bissett demands hostages to be freed first, to which Grace agrees with the condition that he retrieves the hostages personally and to bring Clements with him. Meanwhile, Tom causes a diversion to facilitate the escape of the wounded girl, successfully guiding her to safety with the SAS. Major Bissett puts Declan in command as he and Clements board the hijacked train. Grace later confronts Sophie. As Zeta goes through the phone Sophie surrendered earlier, she finds out it is not hers. Grace orders Zeta to inspect Sophie thoroughly to find her real phone. Suspecting she and Tom are somehow connected, Zeta soon finds her phone and gives it to Grace. Bissett and Clements come face to face with Grace. Not a moment later, Grace drops Bissett, who first appeared to be the informant. Clements makes an attempt to neutralize Grace, but fails. Grace confronts him about the British government's involvement in hiring the Black Swans, accusing Clements of betraying their agreement. Clements counters, pointing out their failure to stop a mere girl from recording them with her mobile phone. Following their negotiation, Grace lets Clements go as they agree to a ransom. Unbeknownst to him, Zeta has been secretly recording their entire confrontation. Tom continues his efforts to foil the Black Swan's plans. He engages one of the mercenaries setting up an explosive device on a gas pipeline in the tunnel. Back in the UK, the Prime Minister and Charles Whiteside of Britgaz agree to pay the ransom, concealing their involvement in hiring the Black Swans for the operation in Georgia. Tom reaches out to Declan, revealing Grace's plan to detonate the gas pipeline. Declan tries to convince Tom to find a way out, but he refuses to leave without Sophie. In a shocking twist, Declan is revealed to be the true traitor. Angered by Grace's intentions to blow up the gas pipeline, Declan is forced to betray Tom, revealing his identity and relationship with Sophie under threat of exposure. As Tom patches up his wounds, he checks up on Sophie via text, unaware that Grace has intercepted her phone. Grace intends to lure Tom into a trap. However, Tom's instincts allow him to see through the ruse. He takes Oliver hostage upon boarding the train, hoping to trade him for Sophie. During a confrontation, Grace shoots Oliver, determined to drop Tom by any means necessary. Tom manages to take cover and orchestrate an explosion within the train car, using the chaos that followed to escape. With the ransom money wired to the Black Swans, Grace obliges to free the passengers, ordering the remainder of her men to fire up the train through the tunnel and escape by disguising as civilians. Grace and Oliver stay, taking Sophie as a hostage, using an alternate route out of the tunnel. As Tom pursues Grace, he discovers their plan to escape through the gas pipeline. Oliver decides to stay and hold back Tom, engaging in a fierce battle with Oliver. Tom manages to incapacitate him by removing his gas mask. He quickly follows Grace and Sophie through the gas pipeline. Meanwhile, the SAS secures the perimeter with snipers as the train exits the tunnel. Upon identifying the Black Swans among the civilians, Declan is forced to give the order to eliminate them. In a desperate bid to evade capture, Grace triggers the explosives within the gas pipeline to disorient Tom and Sophie as they emerge into the French countryside. As the chaos unfolds, Clements discovers Declan as the traitor. Their confrontation is interrupted by the explosion in the tunnel, which causes a nearby helicopter to careen into the control tower. In the aftermath, Grace injures Sophie to slow Tom down. Tom rushes to Sophie to tend to her wound, but Sophie insists that Tom go after Grace and drop her off. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the recording of Grace's confrontation with Clements goes live, revealing to the public the British government's involvement with hiring the Black Swans in the Georgia operation. Tom chases after Grace in the woods, and a physical altercation ensues. When Tom overpowers her, Grace tries to manipulate him as a last resort. Grace tells Tom that unlike Sophie, who will never understand him, she can help him embrace his true nature. Tom appears to be contemplating whether to spare her, but ultimately decides to neutralize Grace once and for all. As Tom and Sophie resume their trip to Paris, he finally takes the leap and proposes. However, Sophie declines him, saying that she and Tom are too different. Sophie is a doctor who saves lives, while Tom is a soldier who takes lives. In Tom's moment of vulnerability, Sophie begins to understand and accept his complexity, which leads her to accept his marriage proposal. The story culminates in Tom and Sophie's wedding, which is promptly interrupted by Clements informing Tom that Declan's whereabouts have been found. With Sophie's newfound understanding and support for Tom's duties as an SAS operative, she encourages him to fully embrace his nature, allowing him to confront Declan to protect his country. Tom's battle left you on edge? Guess what's next for our hero? Hit like, drop your predictions, and don't forget to subscribe.